Thank you for joining me this morning. Today we're going to be in Matthew chapter 8, verses 16 through 20. Our suggested memory verse this week comes from Philippians 2, verse 8. And being found in fashion as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. Just for fun, I thought today we would do a maze. And if you enjoy this, remember to like, subscribe, and share. Okay, well, today we're going to be in Matthew chapter 8. We're starting in verse 16. And when even was come, they brought unto him many that were possessed with devils, and he cast out spirits with his word, and healed all that were sick. If we read this out of the book of Mark, Mark says, and all the city was gathered together at the door. So this whole city's gathered together at the door. So this seems to indicate that they're still at Peter's house. We know it's evening time. It's still the same day, so it's still the Sabbath. In Leviticus, it says, and shall be unto you a Sabbath of rest, and ye shall afflict your souls in the 9th day of the month at even. From even unto even shall ye celebrate the Sabbath. This seems to say that they honored the Sabbath from the evening before to the evening of. Maybe this is why everyone waited until even to come to Jesus. They didn't go anywhere on the Sabbath until even. Then they came to Jesus. It says, they brought unto him. I'm thinking that they means the whole city is bringing sick people to Jesus. And it says, and he cast out spirits with his word. Jesus didn't hesitate. He healed everyone that came and asked. He rebukes the devil with his word. He doesn't seem to touch them. I don't know if he ever touched those that were possessed by devils. The ones I'm thinking of, he rebuked the devils with his word and they left. You think of the man in the synagogue. When they were in the synagogue, there was a man possessed by a devil. Jesus said, hold thy peace and come out. But he didn't touch him, and it came out. You think of when Jesus went to the Gadarenes, the devils begged Jesus to send them into the swine. Jesus did, but it doesn't mention that he touched the man. You think of the boy. A man came to Jesus and said his son had a demon. He foams at the mouth and your disciples can't cast him out. What did Jesus do? Jesus spoke to it and it came out. In these instances, he didn't touch them. So he didn't touch these people anyway. But anyway, he cast them out with his word. And this says, and he cast out the spirits with his word and healed all that were sick. There's two different categories here. Some had demons and some were sick, but Jesus healed all of them. He has power over everything. He has power over all sicknesses. And then we go to verse 17, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet Isaiah the prophet, saying, himself took our infirmities and bare our sicknesses. When I look at this verse, to me, this is Jesus' whole mission. This is his mission statement. This tells why Jesus came. This is his purpose. This is his goal. We read out of Isaiah 53:4 and 5. It says, surely he hath borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. At the time Isaiah wrote this, Israel was going through a really hard time. Isaiah wrote this to give the people a message of hope. He's telling them that one day the deliverer will come and bear our iniquities. You know, Jesus came to bear our pain. He absorbed our pain physically, spiritually, emotionally. Smitten of God talks about the physical pain that Jesus would suffer. We don't have to face our pain alone. It reminds me of the poem, Footprints in the Sand. And if you remember the poem, there were two sets of footprints, a certain man and Jesus. And at one point, this man noticed that at the hardest times of his life, there's only one set of footprints. And he couldn't understand why. So he asked Jesus, why would you leave me in the hardest times of my life? And you think, what was Jesus' answer? He said, I never left you. Those times when you only saw one set of footprints, that's when I carried you. And we go to verse 5, Isaiah 53:5. But he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. This illustrates that the pain that Jesus would go through. He took our iniquities and he bore them. The chastisement of our peace was upon him. This means his suffering was meant to bring us peace. Because I can't imagine what that would have been like. We go back to verse 17. And it says, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, himself took our infirmities and bare our sicknesses. All these people are coming to Jesus to be delivered from devils or to be healed. Jesus heals all of them. He doesn't hesitate. He has a great love for these people. According to this verse, this is why he came. By his stripes we are healed. He came to heal us and to forgive us of our sins. He came to heal us physically and spiritually. He came to heal, to bring hope, to restore. He cares about the things that we go through. He came to bring us abundant life. You think of John 10:10. The thief cometh, but for to steal and to kill and to destroy. But I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. He came to give us abundant life. We move on to verse 18. Now when Jesus saw great multitudes about him, he gave commandment to depart unto the other side. And you look at that word, great multitudes. People are coming from everywhere. They're following Jesus from everywhere. And this says he gave commandment to depart unto the other side. This suggests that Peter's house maybe was close to the Sea of Galilee. Jesus goes outside and ministers to all the people, and now he's by the Sea of Galilee. It may be a completely different day. It really doesn't specify. It appears that he's trying to get away from the crowd. Jesus might want to talk to his disciples alone. He may want to go pray. We read several times where Jesus goes alone and prays. He may want to rest. He tells his disciples to depart unto the other side. Verse 19. And a certain scribe came and said unto him, Master, I will follow thee whithersoever thou goest. A scribe is a person that is skilled in writing. He's knowledgeable in the law. So this may be a religious scholar. He's an expert in Jewish law. Some think he may have been a teacher in the law. But if you look, he says master, so he recognizes who Jesus is. He's respectful. He's humbling himself. He's showing Jesus honor. And he says, I will follow thee whithersoever thou goest. He seems eager. He seems to have a desire to follow Jesus. We go to verse 20. And Jesus saith unto him, Foxes have holes, the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man hath not where to lay his head. You think of a fox, just for fun. What is a male fox called? Do you know? A male fox is called a dog. Do you know what a female is called? A female fox is called a vixen. This says foxes have holes. In the late winter, probably around December, January, somewhere around there, they dig holes. They dig dens to give birth. Vixens live in the dens throughout the mating season. They raise their young. Usually the kits stay in the dens for about 4 to 5 weeks until they start eating solid foods. They store food in the dens, but they don't sleep in their dens very often. They sleep in the den for protection. Their holes are hidden to protect them from predators. It also protects them from the weather. They stay in there during bad weather as well. They don't live in the holes all year round. When it's warmer, they stay above ground. My point is that their holes are temporary. They use holes to rest. They use holes to hide from danger. And then it says the birds of the air have nests. Do you know what female birds are called? Female birds are called hens. Male birds have different names depending on their species. Rooster, cock, gander, drake, etc. It just depends on what type of bird it is. They build nests in the spring to raise their young. They normally build a new nest for each litter of birds. Some only live in the nest for around 9 or 10 days. Some birds, like owls, develop more slowly, so they're in the nest longer, about 28 days. But the longer they stay in that nest, the less safe that they are. Their nests are temporary. When I say baby birds, baby foxes, nests, holes, spring, what does that sound like? You think about it. What do those words sound like? What do they have in common? Baby birds, baby foxes, nests, holes, spring. Well, to me, it represents new life. That's why Jesus came, was to offer us new life. He doesn't stay in the same place either. Jesus travels around a lot too. Okay, and you look at this first. But and Jesus saith unto him, the foxes have holes, the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man. Jesus used this term to refer to himself. He's lowering himself and coming to earth in the form of a man. We read from Philippians 2:7, but he made himself of no reputation and took upon him the form of a servant and was made in the likeness of men. And being found in fashion as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. We go to Hebrews 2:9. But we see Jesus, who was made a little lower than the angels for the suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor, that he, by the grace of God, should taste death for every man. This statement is a sign of humility. To think that the creator of the world, the king of the universe, the one that created everything, would come to earth in the form of a man. He would bear our sins. He would taste death so we could be saved. This title, Son of Man, represents humility. It represents love. And it says, the Son of Man hath nowhere to lay his head. You think about it. Jesus was on the move constantly. He lives completely by faith. So Jesus is telling the scribe how following Jesus is going to be a lot different than he's used to. It's going to require sacrifice. It's not always going to be comfortable. You're not going to have all the comforts that you're used to. I personally think that this statement made this man examine himself. Jesus doesn't say, no, you can't come. Jesus is trying to get that man to come to that conclusion that he's not ready. Because you think about it, the Bible doesn't say anything else about that man. So apparently, he didn't like that idea. Or apparently, he started to realize, hey, I'm not ready for that. I don't know if he was only after recognition or if he didn't understand what all was involved in following Jesus, but God saw his heart. God knew he wasn't ready to leave all and follow him. Okay, now, just a second. I'm going to show you this slide. This is the maze. I'll let you look at a little bit, and then we're going to go through the answer, see if you can solve this maze. And if you enjoy this, remember to like, subscribe, and share. And thank you so much for watching.